At this point I can begin building the skeletons, and one of the most important things to consider when building a skeleton is to determine which viewport you would use to draw a specific body part. Now I have a very simple formula for figuring this out, and I covered it in quite a bit of detail in the Exercise 6 training series. So if you need a bit of a refresher on that, I would refer back to that training series rather than going through the whole process again. But just to summarize quickly, what you're trying to do is you're trying to line it up so that every bone in a chain's local z-axis describes the most common rotational pivot of the character in question. So for example, this character's arms, the most common movement of the arms is going to be a back and forth motion while the character's arms are up in the air here. Essentially, if the character were to lower the arms down to his sides, we would just have this back and forth motion as if the character were walking, like the arms were swinging in a walk stride. And we want to line that up so that it coincides with the local z-axis. For the arms, if I were to draw a 2D chain, we would be drawing them in a top view. And the reason we would do this is because in XSI, the local z-axis when we're drawing IK chains points out of the viewport we're drawing in. And if you remember back in the 6.0 training series, we never draw our bones in a camera view because it makes the placement of the axes a little unpredictable for the artist or the person building the skeleton. You can see in this case, if I were to grab what would be the forearm bone of the character and rotate it, you can see that the z-axis is looking straight out of the view. In other words, we're pivoting around the z-axis, and that z-axis, the pole, if you will, for that axis is looking straight out at us, and that would mimic the movement of the arm bending at the elbow. Notice that if we built our arm chain in the front view instead, and we tried to rotate that forearm bone, again, Z is always looking out of the view that we draw in at us, and so if I bent the arm down like so, with the palm at the position it's currently in, it's an impossible move. Remember, our elbow is a hinging joint. It only bends in one direction, really. It does a little bit of a bending in the opposite Y direction, but very, very minimal. And it also torques around itself, so it rotates around its own x-axis. So this would be an incorrect view to draw the arms in. And much like the legs, the main pivot of the legs would be to sweep sort of back and forth, sort of the knee bending backwards if the character was walking. And so if I were to draw the skeleton for the legs in the right view, well, the Z then would correspond with that proper knee pivot, much like the thigh would as well. Again, this is the bone's local axis. So if you happen to be looking at global, you're going to get an incorrect evaluation of which axis you're looking at. So you always want to make sure you're in local, and you can switch by just right-clicking and going from local, global, additive, etc. If we were to draw that same chain in the front view, again, you'd see that Z would be looking out at us, and if I bend it now, we would actually be breaking the character's knees. So some good Steven Seagal action going on there. Again, to delete a chain, if you remember, you can't just left-click and select on a chain to press delete. You physically have to go in and use your mouse commands, the left, middle, and right, and in our case, just right-click and select the tree or the chain, and then you can delete it as a whole. So we'll use that idea to build up the skeleton for our character, and I'm only going to build the skeleton on one side of the character because I'm going to be able to mirror it across to the other side. And what I'm going to try and do is build the left side of the character up, name all the bones, parent them together, and then mirror everything over and save myself a lot of work.